And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news, and today we have a guest, a repeat guest, but it's been a minute. He has started his own podcast, and of course, the last time you talked to us wasn't about paint; it was about your new podcast, and it has exploded. And we're going to talk a lot about it today. But first, please take a second and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, I'm Jim Chapman. I am creator and host of Local Leaders, the podcast.
And it has you create a little podcast empire here. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the other things that you offer and do after we talk about just the absolutely massive growth that you've had with Local Leaders.
Yes.
So first and foremost, just a quick recap on Local Leaders. You used to do a podcast about paint.
Yes.
And you got really sort of, I don't want to say addicted, that's a little much, but you got really into podcasts.
Yeah.
And so what, I know that you retired from Farrell.
Yes.
Because you wanted to pursue this. So let's first talk about the name.
Well, addicted is a good word. I was definitely addicted. Podcasting and media in general, always been kind of a computer nut. Anything that was out of the norm of what people typically do every day, I was attracted to. And as you said, I had a paint podcast, and I'm fond of telling people it had a little traction, but nobody loved paint like I did.
Sure.
And so it kind of had that 100, 200 downloads, and it would kind of stop at that point. So the other passion that I had in life was local business. I always wanted to support local folks, really passionate about it. And that's kind of where Local Leaders was bred. It was a way for me to kind of help those businesses compete with large corporations.
So really, it's a support system.
Yes.
For local business. And you, of course, being a local businessman yourself, you live right outside of Denham Springs here in Livingston Parish. So, since that time, you actually started your first few episodes were here in this office, not in this particular office, but it was in my office. Of course, this room has since been built, but you have your own office and your own studio now.
Yes.
You have grown into, well, like we said, kind of a little empire. So tell us a little bit about your office.
Well, so as you just mentioned, you engineered my podcast for a while and did a fantastic job of that. Of course, you and I were movers and shakers, and you were getting busy, and I could kind of see that. And I didn't, the last thing I want to do is take away from that, because you were doing me a huge favor and really got me kicked off. So I started looking for a building in order to house a podcast and kind of build a studio. Was lucky to find one right in the center of town here in Denham Springs, a street over from the post office on Del Norte. Boom, off we went. I bought, the best in equipment. I actually Googled Joe Rogan's podcast equipment and copied the majority of it. SM7B microphones everywhere, and even the holders for the microphones are his same holders. He's my favorite podcaster, so I figured if it was good enough for him, it'd be good enough for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I actually came by a couple of months back.
Yes.
And took a look around, and I know our electrician came in, and
Yes.
hope his work was good. I know.
Great.
Good. So, when we're talking about a lot of this, it's interesting because I remember when you got started and you and I were working together, it was always one a week, and, we were trying to get them in, get them processed, get them done, get them uploaded. Looking at it now, you're way ahead of the game.
Yeah.
You're not only has your popularity risen, we're going to talk about the numbers in just a second, but I mean, people want to be on your show, and you're booked out from what I can tell.
Yes.
So, I mean, let's talk about some of the things that you have coming up, and I believe a lot of these are already recorded. Miss Kayla Johnson of Covington and Associates.
Yes.
She's a realtor. Fahim with Casa Maria. I saw a picture on social media the other day. You already recorded the one with Mr. Johnny Lombardi.
Yes.
And I want to talk about that for just a second. We talked back and forth briefly before the show because I wanted to learn a little bit about it. That's going to be part of your Listen Up Livingston.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that kind of grew out of Local Leaders, correct?
Correct. Basically, what was happening when Local Leaders started, Local Leaders was it was a podcast featuring local business. And through that, there were a lot of community projects that I had a passion for. And of course, the people coming on the show had a passion for. They wanted to come on, discuss those projects because we were blessed to have a large audience. The issue more than anything else is I felt like it was kind of convoluting local leaders where you weren't really aware of what you were getting until you watched the show. Maybe it was going to be a local business on that show, or maybe it was going to be a nonprofit, or maybe it was going to be a community leader. So I felt like there needed to be a separation. And so, although they're all going to be on the same network, the same channels, uh, it, it'll be more or less like a special edition called Listen Up Livingston. And that will be nonprofits, that will be community leaders, anything outside of a business owner is probably the best way to put it.
Sure. And, Mr. Lombardi teaches digital, well, it right up the wheelhouse. He teaches
Yes.
digital media at the STEM Center for Denham Springs High School. So actually, my stepson took his class. So, he does a great job. He also runs the DSTV page. So
Yes.
y'all are going to have plenty to talk about, I am sure.
Oh, yeah.
And rounding that out, there are two others, Mr. Rick Foster, who is the city building inspector for City of Denham Springs, and then Mr. Jared Andrews, who is the registrar of voters, and then Tenor Floral from Watson. So good eclectic mix there.
Yes.
And lots of things upcoming. So, I mean, let's get into the numbers. I mean, you have exploded. You have eclipsed over 700,000 downloads and 30,000 followers. And, oh, wow, you were a nominee for the Best Business Podcast in the 2021 People's Choice Award. Let's start with the numbers. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Amazing and undeserving. And, all those things you would expect someone to say if they were just being nice, but I really feel that way. Never saw that coming. And really, it's a testament to the guests that we have on the show. People hear me talk every week. They tune in, they listen, they download those podcasts for the people that I have on there. The Livingston Parish community, one thing great about it is it's just full of leaders. I mean, I have a list a mile long of people I'd love to sit down with that I still haven't sat down with yet. And every time I have someone on the show, I learn something new about their business and about them and their leadership capabilities, all those things. So yeah, it's a total blessing, and I can't explain it. I tell people all the time, they want to know what my trick is. I said, there's no trick. I just sit down and talk to people.
Sure. And I mean, that's how they started. It's a long form podcast.
Yeah.
These are, longer interviews, anywhere from 45 to about 115 minutes, somewhere like that.
Exactly. And, one of the things we try to explain to people, to produce one podcast for us takes between 9 and 12 hours. There's a reason for that. The first is we have a pre-meeting where this person comes in, they sit down with me, and we kind of script out very vaguely what that podcast is going to be about. So I'm talking to them, I'm learning how they got into their business, what their why is, the hot buttons regarding their business, and I just script it out kind of on a piece of paper, and it's crazy. It looks like Chinese when I'm done with it, and only I can understand it. At that point, they leave. I send them a questionnaire that's 25 general questions, and I start scripting. When I script, it's about 3 hours. I really dive deep. I look on the internet. I get all the information I possibly can on their podcast, and then I make it flow to where when they come in to do that interview, you almost can't even tell it's scripted. It's just a good flow, and they know exactly where I'm going with every question I ask.
Sure, and it's kind of that deep dive with them that there's a comfort element that you have to add to something like that because people get nervous.
Yes.
So bringing them in beforehand, was that kind of when you were thinking about, okay, these are the steps I want to take to make this happen? Was bringing them in at the beginning, was that one of those things? This is the way that will get them really comfortable with the process.
You're exactly 100% right. When people don't want to do a podcast, it's because they're nervous. Typically, it has nothing to do with the fact that they don't want to do a podcast. Well, how do you make them feel comfortable? You show them the facility ahead of time. You sit them down. You explain to them the process. The good thing about local leaders is it's not live. We can edit out if somebody says something and we're done, and it has happened where they're like, can you please take that out? I shouldn't have said that. No problem. We edit every episode after, take out the O's, ums. I adjust the lighting a little bit in post production, and I make sure the sound is good and crisp. So it's really no problem to edit out whatever they would like me to at that point, and it makes them feel more comfortable because they can come in, they can see where they're going to be sitting, they can play with the microphone a little bit if they want to. All of those things.
Sure. So, it's interesting when you're, I guess the best way to put it is, do you see that this sort of success has started to open up, like Listen Up Livingston? Has the success in the business realm sort of opened up these other avenues?
Yes, it has. It really has. And Listen Up Livingston is really our version of giving back to the people that give to us, because we are a business. I have a staff that I am absolutely, these are rock stars in this community. And one thing that I always wanted is people that work with me, I want them to be passionate about Livingston Parish, right? So we have Tiffany Seacar, we have Kelly Jennings, and we have Brooke LaBar, who are all passionate. They're all very deep into this community, and they do a great job for me. But together we have to give back too, because we have to charge for a podcast. I pay these ladies. I have a studio and a booth. So while we charge, it's not expensive. So nobody freak out. It's very cheap. I'm very cheap, but I do have to charge something. And all of that being said, I also have a lot of nonprofits that I would never charge. I also have a lot of community leaders that I want to sit down and talk to. I had the fire department on the other day. They have a millage coming up that they need, in my opinion. Since 1979, they've had a 10 mil, and they're requesting a raise in the millage. Those are things that are important to put on the show, but you're not going to charge the fire department.
Sure.
I'm not gonna.
Sure. Well, and it's a public service.
Yes, 100%.
So in sticking with that a little bit, even when you're requesting funds from people, you're trying to give them the best bang for their buck.
100%. Yes.
So from a business owner standpoint, how does being a business owner yourself and having dealt with sort of business ownership on the side, even when you were doing the paint, your paint job,
yeah,
how has that sort of formulated your approach with these business owners when they come in?
Well, I think it's of a huge advantage that I've kind of been in their position, and I know what business owners are looking for. So when we sit down, we do that initial pre-meeting. One of the things we do is we show our analytics to that business, and we cover, how many downloads we've had on YouTube, how many downloads we've had overall, what percentage of those downloads are local. Very important thing. We cover how many Facebook followers we have, for example. All of those things we cover, we give to them. It's actually a sheet we print out and give to them, because it's important for them to know that, hey, you make an investment, because that's what it is. It's an investment in your business. This is the kind of return you may see. Now, there's a difference between advertising and marketing. Advertising is a coupon in a lot of cases, something you can track easily. Marketing is like some people would say billboard, something like that you can't necessarily track. We're kind of in between, because people that do our podcast, they know people watch it because they come in and they say, hey, I saw your podcast. I've had really, really good success with people telling me that they've gotten great feedback on it, picked up jobs off of it, those sorts of things. So
yeah, and a lot of you and I are both in the same BNI group. A lot of testimonials in there for people who have done the show and have gotten great results.
Yes.
So I want to wrap up this portion real quick. Before I go over who's coming up again, tell the viewers exactly where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can, we're all over the place. You can find us obviously on Facebook at Local Leaders Podcast. Same thing with Instagram. You can go to YouTube and you can just basically go to Local Leaders, the podcast. Just search that on YouTube, the podcast, and it'll pull our page up on YouTube. And we have every episode we've ever recorded on there. So,
including some of the rougher early ones.
Yes, including those, and the website, www.localleadersthepodcast.com.
Gotcha. And remember, coming up, that's Kayla Johnson with Covington & Associates. She is a local realtor. Fahim with Casa Maria, that's in Watson. Johnny Lombardi with Denham Springs TV, and of course, he is also a teacher. That's the beginning of your Listen Up Livingston run. Tenor Floral from Watson, Mr. Rick Foster, Building Inspector from City of Denham Springs, and Jared Andrews, Registrar of Voters in Livingston Parish, both of those Listen Up Livingston part of that series.
Yes.
Now, we discussed empires at the beginning. Want to get into that now because you have expanded. And first, want to congratulate you on being able to produce Real Life, Real Crime, which Woody Overton has been on your show. He's been on this one before, both talking about just his podcast and specific cases that he pursues in general.
Yes.
This is part of your Envision Livingston podcast, correct?
Yes.
It's sort of where you offer up your podcast booth for, I guess, lease, so people can come in and use it. Talk to us a little bit about that relationship with Woody before we get into some of these others that you're doing.
Yeah, so the world famous Woody Overton, just a great guy. He gives just about as much as he receives on this earth to other things. A big Lopa supporter and a great friend of mine. The way me and Woody kind of got involved was through a podcast. I begged him to come on this show and actually in this studio at many years ago. I think you'll remember that. And he came on graciously. I was nothing. He was worldwide. And we had a great conversation. Since then, I've had him on 2 other times. And through that process, he was in a situation where he was changing producers. I don't know the details of that, but the producer he did have, I know, had gotten busy, and I think they were just going in a different direction. He reached out to me. He said, hey, what do you think about producing Real Life, Real Crime? So that's essentially someone saying, hey, what do you think about producing the #1 true crime podcast in the world? And I'm like, wow, that sounds good to me.
That sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, me and hello. So that's basically how it started, and through that we have branched off a series called #Justice4, because much like we were talking about earlier with Listen Up Livingston, #Justice4 is going to be Woody just dealing with cold cases. And then Real Life, Real Crime will be obviously his old cop stories.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring up real quick? I remember that one vividly because I remember you and I were talking post-production, and there were a couple of times when I think you shocked him by how much you had dug into his life and some of the things he had written in the past and that kind of thing.
He still talks about that.
I remember you after you were like, I think I freaked him out. I think I dug a little too deep.
Yeah.
But that was good because I mean that that was a very popular episode,
Yes.
and a lot of people got to see a side of Woody that they hadn't seen before.
Yes, and that's the whole goal of both of any show that I do. Is everybody knows who you are in your business usually, but nobody really knows who you are outside of your business, and that's what our show brings out.
Sure. So let's talk about some of the other shows you produce before, because we're going to keep moving. You got something else you do. Tell us a little bit about. It looks like there's 3 of them with a 4th coming soon.
Yes.
So tell us about it.
Yeah. So we produce 3 other podcasts in addition to Real Life, Real Crime. Thin Fat Line with Whitney is a podcast we produce. They do a great job. 2 Bald Guys podcast, which is me and our buddy James Adam McCants. And that's just comic relief and similar to yours that you do with the 2 gentlemen. I'm struggling with
Rob
the name.
and David. Yeah. Here at the news.
Yeah. That's an interesting podcast as well. But we just talk about, our view on life, basically, which is really scary, folks, trust me, but entertaining nonetheless. Be the Queen, which is a podcast starring Peyton Courtney. That's on hiatus right now because Peyton decided to get pregnant and have a baby. Can't blame her for that, but
Sure.
But she'll be coming back soon. A total rock star. Actually, my #1 downloaded podcast in history, over 50-something thousand downloads. Miss Peyton Courtney is owner of Idell Lane Spine Boutique in Walker and is an absolute rock star. So one coming up brand new, not even hit the wire yet, is called Hustle Makes It Happen, the podcast. This is with 2 developers from Livingston Parish, Justin Bryson and Chase Catalano.
Okay.
And they are some motivating individuals, so that'll be coming soon. I'm excited about that one.
Very cool. So that again, do you think that your success with local leaders has drawn these people to you to come use your studio?
1,000,000%. And, we make it look, McHugh, a lot of people, they want to do a podcast and they have a great premise and they're really good behind a microphone, but they don't want to do all the engineering for it. They don't want to do the editing, the post-production. They don't want to go spend, 10 grand on equipment. They just want to come in and do something, talk and leave and let me do everything else. That's what we do. It's turnkey operation. If you want to edit your own thing, you can come in, rent the studio and take it home and edit it. Most people don't. That's the time-consuming part. If you don't do this full-time every day, it's hard to find time to edit, upload, and stuff. Trust me, I tried for about a year as
tough.
a side hustle. It's tough. And you will only grow so far without having someone doing that for you.
Sure. Yeah, because it does get tedious.
Yes.
Talking about something else before we get into your consulting services, you also, I think you've already had one audiobook recording, correct?
I have.
So that's something else that you can do in your studio. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, never saw that coming. One thing I'm very proud of with Local Leaders of the podcast is our sound there is just amazing. Nothing to do with me, everything to do with the mics in the room. But I invested a lot of money in having, movie theater curtains. A padding underneath my carpet that is like radio station padding. It really absorbs sound well. And I have strategically in the room things that absorb sound. So due to that, our sound is really good. I had a guy who wrote a book. He came on my podcast. I interviewed him. He reached out to me after watching the podcast. He said, "Man, your sound is so good, I'd like to record my audiobook in there." I said, "Whoa. There's another avenue." So I had never thought about that. He did that. And then I've had other people reach out since and are interested in recording audiobooks. There's nowhere around here that does that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's places, but they can do it in a setting where it's at their pace. I actually sit down with them and I'm in the room the whole time they're reading that audiobook, and I just kind of make sure nothing gets out of place. I've got headphones on, so I'm listening for, maybe sounds that they may not be hearing, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So once again, being able to produce something
Yes.
different. I mean, just all sorts of avenues.
Yeah.
Who would have thought one booth, many avenues?
Yeah, it's like a tree that just keeps growing branches.
Hey,
it's crazy.
What is it? 7 streams of income.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're growing that tree.
That's it.
So let's talk about another branch, consulting services that you're offering. Are these? I think you have here. They're podcast specific.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where that idea.
So I had another podcast reach out at one point. They said, "Jim, they had been watching my growth since the beginning, and they were struggling. They had a good massive, not a massive following, but they had a good loyal following, and they couldn't get over the hump, and they couldn't figure out why. And they said, 'Man, do you do consulting services?' And I said, 'Well, yes, I do.' And at the time, that was the first time I had thought of that. But they asked me about it. I said, yes. They came in. And before they came in, I did like an audit of their podcast. I looked at all their social media, kind of looked at how they were promoting it, how many followers they had. I found a lot of things they were missing, common things. So it's not like these people didn't know what they were doing, but unless you are really deep into podcasting, you wouldn't know these techniques. So I basically used what I learned to get to where I'm at with my podcast, and I passed it on to them, that information. Things like tagging, you've got to tag those podcasts correctly. Things like using certain artwork is important. Asking for reviews for iTunes is massive for getting downloads on iTunes. You're not going to rank without reviews. So things like that were things they weren't thinking of. Their content was great. Well, we went through that process and they grew. They picked up 1,000 followers in like a month and a half after that, just on YouTube, which is a hard animal to master. And they're moving right along. So we've had several that we've consulted with now that I'm happy to see their growth, because we're like a little community. We all want to support each other in the podcast world for sure.
Sure. So I want to run through these services real quick. It's a by the hour deal, full audit of your podcast. You mentioned a couple of things: targeting keywords, consistency, audio, video quality, scripting, subject matter, and reach.
Yeah, so those are all things we help them with. Scripting, consistency especially. Look, if you're not consistent, you could be, I don't know, anybody, Oprah Winfrey. If you're not consistent on your drops, you're probably not going to get, well, Oprah's a bad example. She'd still probably get.
Back when Oprah was new.
Yeah, back when yeah, exactly. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of traction. Consistency is everything. That's a tip I'll give you for free right here on the show. If you want to start a podcast, pick a day, drop at the same time every day, or every week that same day. Because when people don't know when you're coming on, they don't know when to look for you.
Yeah.
So
I will, quick personal, I used to do a morning show.
Yeah. Great morning show.
And I got sick one week and my viewership cut in half.
Yes.
So you do have to stay consistent. You got to figure out a way to do it.
100%.
So with all that being said, you're growing this podcast tree here in Livingston Parish. Want to wrap it up to give you 2 minutes to talk about something that you already said that you interview everybody on when they come into your shop. Why? Tell us about your why.
My why is more than anything else, love for community. I really do make you feel absolutely blessed and absolutely undeserving to sit down with the people I sit down with. Yesterday I had Kayla Johnson on the show. We filmed her podcast, and the whole time we're sitting there, she's talking about her family's history in this parish, which is deep, deep, deep. I mean, she's got roots that probably go 6 miles down in the dirt, right? And all I could think the whole time was, wow, this woman's an amazing realtor.
Yeah.
34 years of selling homes in this community. And she said about 10 things in that podcast that I learned from right off the bat. So I'm thinking, I am absolutely blessed just to be sitting across from this lady. That happens all the time. The mayor comes on my show. He comes on your show a lot, I know. And I feel blessed that those people think enough of me to actually even come on my show and spend time with me. I really do. It's all about community for me. One thing I'm doing, and I didn't even put this on the notes, and when I say it, you're going to be like, what, Ro? But I'm actually running for District 4's parish council seat.
I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up or not, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And people have asked me why, it's funny. A lot of community leaders have asked me, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to run for the parish council? And again, it is progression in service. And my life, look, I've had a great life so far. I'm almost 50. This is my way of giving back. Everything from here on out, my life's going to be about giving back. That's really the truth. I've never served in public office. I am not a politician, and I have no desire to be a politician. I want to be someone that just helps improve the city. And that District 4 now, since they've redistricted, is going to cover the whole city of Denham Springs. I feel like I just kind of bring a new energy to that.
Sure. And yeah, I was going to say District 4 does cover the Denham Springs area and some areas south and to the east.
Yes.
So, and that election will be next fall.
Yes.
So 2023.
Yeah, still a ways away.
Yeah. And, some of it, what's interesting, and I am going to throw it out there, though, this particular council did pass term limits, and some of those guys are choosing to honor their first term as one of those terms, even though they don't technically have to by law.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how many of them do. Now, a couple of them have been replaced. They only went for one term. So, sir, thank you for the community. And, of course, you hired out of the community as well. Those ladies that work for you are all community-based ladies.
They are indeed, and we mentioned that earlier, and I do want to thank them. And just one more thing on that note, because I want to shout her out. I'm very proud of her. Tiffany Seacard, who is my producer. Mm-hmm. So Kelly Jennings and Brooke LaBar do sales for me, but Tiffany produces for me. Tiffany is in, I don't know if y'all can see, that's Paris Hilton, right? On the front cover there. That's Podcast Magazine. This is the biggest podcast magazine really in the country. Kind of like the Sports Illustrated of podcasting. 22 Unsung Heroes are in there. Tiffany's one of them.
There you go. For
Local Leaders of Podcast. We never saw this coming, but I'm very proud of her because Tiffany works very, very hard for peanuts.
Well,
I wish I could pay all my ladies $1 million, but I'm not there yet, McHugh. And she really does. She works her butt off for me, and I want to give her accolades and a shout out for that.
Well, it sounds like they believe in you, and it sounds like you'll be there pretty soon.
Yeah.
So if you'll introduce yourself, please, sir.
I am Jim Chapman. I am creator and host of Local Leaders, the podcast.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Good chance to catch up with Mr. Jim Chapman here. Thank you for taking the time, sir. And we appreciate you guys joining us for this Livingston Parish News weekly show. Podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. Please remember that the news is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Woof, that was tough. Once a week in print, $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. And we're online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. We appreciate you joining us for this one, and we'll see you next time.